So death is one of those topics that many people often shy away from, which is really interesting given that sooner or later it will happen to all of us. And there is so much mystery surrounding it, which I guess for some people makes it an exciting adventure, but for others is completely anxiety-inducing, bringing up feelings of fear and dread that can sometimes be so strong that they feel totally overwhelming. In this modern world that we live in, there is so much certainty in life and demand for being in control that something as uncertain and unknowable as death is bound to feel quite frightening for many. But essentially, all that we can have about death is a perspective, because none of us have experienced it ourselves. And that's a really exciting thing, because if we hold a perspective about death, then that perspective can be challenged and changed, allowing you to find peace within the concept. So first things first, let's start with a simple question. Where were you before you were born? Now this is actually a Zen Buddhist koan, which is essentially a kind of mind puzzle that's given to Zen Buddhists to help them achieve enlightenment. As you ponder on the question, you gain insights beyond your conditioned thinking, which allows you to break out of the matrix and consider deeply the nature of existence. In this case, questioning where you were before you were born is one of the best questions that we can ask ourselves if we have a fear of death. There was a time before we existed, at least in this particular form, and there will be a time after. Perhaps it seems less scary that you can't remember before birth than it does after death, but there's an interesting consideration to take place in the fact that so much unknown happens before you arrived here in this existence. And if it happened before, is it not okay for it to happen after as well? And this leads on to our second question of, do you know what happens when you die? Because the truth is, nobody does. Some people might believe that they know, that we go to heaven or hell, or we get reincarnated on earth. But have you ever had a direct, verifiable conversation with somebody who is dead? Can you say with absolute certainty what will happen? Since those who have experienced death aren't here to tell us about it, all we can do is speculate. It's one of life's biggest mysteries. That uncertainty could be viewed as frightening, but it could also be seen as liberating. If it's oblivion that you're scared of, then the idea that after you die there will be a sea of nothingness and you will cease to exist might be quite scary. But it's also a pretty easy one to get your head around because you won't be aware of it. The fear of not existing might seem intense, but if you won't even know that it's happening, then what is there to fear? Another great question to ask yourself is, what marks the beginning of life? Is it the first breath, the point of birth, the first heartbeat, the moment that the sperm and egg collide, the sperm and egg as separate entities, the desire to have the sex that brought the sperm and the egg together? In some ancient cultures, children weren't even seen as a full living being until they were weaned from the breast, because mortality rates were so high until that point. In other cultures, life is not seen as having a beginning or an end because energy constantly cycles from one form into another. There's no agreed upon definitive beginning of life, and this lack of a clear start point makes you wonder, is there really a definitive end? Is life and death much more fluid than we think? And to bring this point even deeper, it's worth considering, when did you personally know that you were alive? At what point in your life did you realise you were alive? If you've ever observed a newborn, then you'll know they have a pretty limited awareness of anything other than their mother, and many people have put forward the theory that they don't see themselves as a separate being from their mother at this age. As a child grows and interacts with the world, they begin to form a sense of self. So if our awareness of life is so gradual and undefined, how can we be sure that we'll have a definitive awareness of death? And aside from all of these points, the reports that do exist from those who've had near-death experiences and have been labelled as clinically dead before coming back into their bodies are overwhelmingly positive and transformative. These accounts aren't definitive proof of what happens after death, but they do heavily suggest that the transition is not one that's to be feared. So if we look at all of the points that we've covered, while we can't ever know for certain if life carries on or not after death, the evidence that we've discussed doesn't really give us a reason to be fearful in any way. The nature of life and death remains a mystery, but perhaps one that isn't as daunting as it may initially seem. Fear of the unknown is very common, but by exploring these questions and interrogating our own perspectives, we can start to shift our view of death from one of fear to one of curiosity and acceptance. If you found this video helpful, then please sign up to our Butterfly Club on our website, zenjungle.org, to be notified of all of our content and any upcoming events. You can also subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Instagram at zen_jungle, and let us know if you have any comments or questions. See you soon.